This is an obvious contradiction that even a slick political operator like Roberts cannot resolve. It's not his fault that the generational factional conflict within the right is coming to a head. You cannot simultaneously appease people who believe in a fixed set of ideas and people who believe that the only ideas worth having are cynicism and revenge. The BoomerCon establishment does not understand that Fuentes is not the problem. He is a symptom.
Is the Republican Party going to embrace and mainstream some of the more radical elements on the right? Take a look at this clip over here with Konstanton Kisin from the Trigonometry podcast. He dissects the reason why is it that so many young people are becoming more extreme these days. So we'll watch this clip together and then talk about it. But first, hit that subscribe button over there in the corner. We'd love to stay in touch. Check this out.
I remember reading a theory of history a long time ago, which gave a persuasive explanation for why human society seemed to repeat the same mistakes over and over. Every generation, it said, only really learns what to do, how to think, and which pitfalls to avoid from the two preceding generations with which it has direct contact. We don't learn lessons from history, we learn them from our parents and grandparents. For proof of this, if you're a man my age, you're likely to know a fair bit about World War II and almost nothing about World War I. No one watching this who is not explicitly a history nerd will know much more than the meaningless basics about the Napoleonic Wars. In other words, if history repeats itself, or at least rhymes, it is because we are repeating the mistakes of our great-grandparents, i.e. people who lived 80 to 90 years ago and could not personally warn us. As the saying goes, those who do not know history are doomed to repeat it, and those who do know history are doomed to watch others repeat it. This is why I think many people cannot see what is happening on the right following the split which began with the invasion of Ukraine and was wedged open by the Israel-Hamas war. The reason for this video is, of course, the unfolding events of the last few days here in the US, where I'm on a month-long recording trip. The story began when Tucker Carlson hosted Nick Fuentes on his show. Fuentes is a streamer on Rumble, where he expresses his admiration for Hitler, who he says is very cool. He asks his followers to join in chants like, "I will kill and rape for Nicholas J. Fuentes," and gives his latest takes on Jewish power in America, mixing all of this in with comments like "around blacks never relax." When Tucker invited Fuentes on for a softball interview, many on the American right, who've been privately shocked by the recent direction some in their movement have taken, began to openly murmur about whether a dangerous line had been crossed. In response, Kevin Roberts, CEO of the Heritage Foundation, whom we interviewed for Trigonometry on our last visit here, released a video in which he robustly defended Carlson against a venomous coalition which was engaging in, quote, cancellation. He pledged eternal friendship to the former Fox News anchor, while also stating that he did not agree with Fuentes' views. This attempt to pacify both sides only stirred matters further. The following day, Roberts expressed disgust at Fuentes' rhetoric and insisted that the answer was not to cancel, but to engage. The problem for Roberts is that this attempt to sit on two stools cannot work. This became exceedingly clear in his interview with Dana Loesch, throughout which Roberts repeatedly insisted that the answer to bad ideas is to engage them, while simultaneously saying that he would never host Fuentes at Heritage or on his podcast. This is an obvious contradiction that even a slick political operator like Roberts cannot resolve. It's not his fault that the generational factional conflict within the right is coming to a head. You cannot simultaneously appease people who believe in a fixed set of ideas and people who believe that the only ideas worth having are cynicism and revenge. The BoomerCon establishment does not understand that Fuentes is not the problem. He is a symptom. And the reason they don't understand that is that they don't understand young men, who make up the overwhelming majority of his audience. This entire phenomenon is driven by a number of factors which are affecting young men. They are the most fatherless generation in history. A quarter of Gen Z grew up without a father present, up from just 9% in 1960. They've had less male guidance and direction than any group of men in American history. Even boys born after World War II, the most murderous war in which over 400,000 American men died. They did not experience the economic prosperity or political stability of the pre-9/11 era. Buying a house, especially in America's major cities, becomes harder every year. They were educated in the school and college system, which is overwhelmingly female. 77% of American school teachers are women. I don't bring this up to criticize female teachers or suggest that they're not as good as men. Many female teachers are great at teaching mathematics, music, geography, and history. but it's just harder for women to teach boys how to be men. As a result of the growing feminization of education and society at large, many young men were not taught to channel their aggression, anger, and competitiveness into productive activity. They were instead taught to suppress these natural male urges. And as any therapist will tell you, you can't keep the things you suppress down forever. Gen Z spent their entire formative years lagging behind women in education and now earnings. Young women without children out-earn men. And for the entirety of this time, they were told that all men are trash, the future is female, and that they were to blame for every ill of humanity. It may be true that women haven't always had a fair deal in society, but that was never the fault of 15-year-old Zoomer boys who understandably bristle at being held responsible for something they neither created nor benefited from. And because they're white men, nobody cares about their problems. Is it really a surprise that some of them are resentful, angry, and openly rebellious? This perfect storm of alienation and the dearth of male guidance presents a lucrative opportunity for a new breed of influencer. Unlike fathers, uncles, male teachers, and sports coaches, Fuentes is not motivated by a desire to make a positive impact on the lives of the boys who listen to him. A father is incentivized to raise his sons in a way that makes them resist their worst instincts. As an influencer who makes money getting views online, Fuentes is incentivized to do the exact opposite. But the reason he delights in saying Hitler was very cool is not only a transgressive revolt against the puritanical gay race communism rammed down his generation's throat during the woke era and a desire for clicks. It's also because, to a generation which lacks the deeply ingrained taboo against fascism, there is no reason why fascism wouldn't be the answer. Some of their great-grandparents thought fascism was a great idea for many of the same reasons they do. Don't believe me? Look at the other side of the political spectrum. The British and American left is rapidly rediscovering its love for communism. Old ideas and old hatreds are returning across the Western world. No matter your views on illegal immigration, nobody who understands history can hear the AfD chanting Ausländer raus in Germany without feeling at least some instinctive discomfort. I've called this faction the woke right. It is a term many are desperate to argue with me about, but few deny the phenomenon I'm describing. A white identitarian movement which, like the woke left, believes in oppressor-oppressed dynamics, racial justice, and a conspiratorial force that's holding them back. On the woke left, the root of all evil was the patriarchy, imagined as a cabal of white men whose sole purpose was to deny equality to women and minorities. On the woke right, it was initially the globalists, but as I predicted in a different video, it has now evolved into simply the Jews, who are responsible for the suffering of the disadvantaged and oppressed white man. This is what people actually mean when they talk about the collapse of the post-World War II order. Shocked by the desolation caused by that war and the evils of fascism, and coming so soon after the war to end all wars, the West decided it might be a good idea to lay down some spoken and unspoken rules about what we can and can't do. One conclusion was that we let down a persecuted minority and we must never do so again. By the mid-90s, the conclusion remained, but the rationale began to slip from our collective memories. The lesson of the Holocaust became quasi-religious dogma, culminating in the deranged notion that no human is illegal. The result was mass uncontrolled immigration into every Western country for the ensuing decades. Another was the increased focus on compassion and inclusion. It's baddies like Hitler that are obsessed with strength and purity, went the logic. Therefore, we must instead embrace empathy and diversity. This is what historian Tom Holland means when he says that we no longer ask, what would Jesus do, and instead ask, what would Hitler do, and then do the opposite. These well-intended norms have now been taken to such extremes that they increasingly produce extreme results, such as open borders, legalized crime, rampant homelessness, and gender ideology. The backlash against all of this was eminently predictable, so much so that many of us have warned for many years that wokeness would produce an equal and opposite reaction on the right. How could it not? Did you really think that telling one group that they're bad because of their sex and skin color, while celebrating and promoting other groups for their sex and skin color, would not produce an identitarian backlash? In any case, Groypers, as Fuentes fans are known, are not conservatives. They are the voice of a generation which feels ignored, mistreated, and unfairly maligned. They don't want small government, they want revenge. The bulwark against this voice of Cain was shot in the neck and killed on a college campus a few weeks ago. Charlie Kirk was single-handedly leading the Zoomer right away from bitterness and resentment, towards God, family, and service. How and whether the remaining principled conservatives try to resolve this attempt to take over their movement remains to be seen.
Everything he says here is eminently true, and you combine that with the fact that this is the first generation that lives in online world and has no recollection of what life was like before the internet and even before smartphones. You get a system that continuously is promoting, the algorithm promotes whatever ideas are being touted. And so that's why you have a lot of young people as well believing things that are against the grain, against the narrative, because the algorithm has fed them as such. So for example, this generation is probably the largest generation, largest grouping of people in centuries that has believed in a flat Earth. That somehow NASA is hiding something from you, even though we've known that the Earth is round long before NASA ever came into existence. But all sorts of conspiracy theories, all sorts of ideas that go against the grain, the idea of the moon landing being fake, and really any number of wild conspiracy theories are things that are promoted, and the algorithm feeds young people these constant lies, these constant ideas, and it reinforces it. And if you're watching constantly video after video about all the different proofs, about all these different conspiracy theories, it's only a matter of time until the worldwide Jewish conspiracy gets thrown into the mix. And you start looking at people that don't believe in these ideas as that they are brainwashed, that they are just kind of going according to the system, and that only the people who have been watching these videos, only they know the truth. Only they know what life is really about. They have been red-pilled. They have come out of the matrix. That's what this is all about. And so it seems like in online world, when you have the algorithm feeding you a certain way, it seems like you have to be an idiot not to understand, not to know these things, unless you have been bought off, unless you're just one of the sheeple that follows whatever is presented in their direction. That is another factor that perpetuates these ideas as well. The question is, what's going to become of it? The question is, what is the right going to do? The left has fully embraced their woke radical end. They've embraced it, and it's become part of the mainstream of their party. One key example of that is the recent election of Zoran Mamdani, who ran as a democratic socialist, who ran as an anti-Israel candidate, who ran on all of the most extreme left views, and was embraced and endorsed by the so-called center and mainstream of the party. The question is the same thing going to happen on the right? Is the conservative movement, or the Republican Party, which was once known for conservatism, are they going to embrace these radical ideas, these sort of woke right, as Konstanton calls it? Are they going to embrace it and make it become more mainstream? And what's going to happen to the rest of America, the main part of America that is basically just center-right, that is wants a normal way of going back to politics and a normal way of looking at the world, a normal way where people can have conversations with each other, not radical extremist views that polarize everybody. We shall see how it all unfolds, and we'll be with you along the way to report on it. If you like this content overall, hit that subscribe button over there in the corner. We'd love to stay in touch. Take care.